everybody. Thank you very much for joining our webinar. I'm Dr. Deepika Mirpuri. I'm the founder of SAS Global Education. Over the next 30 minutes or so, we are going to listen to Mr. Mohit Karnani. He is pursuing his PhD at MIT right now. And you will get to know a lot about Mohit. He is an international student, just like a lot of you are. He has gone through a lot as well in his journey to get into his dream college, which is MIT, a dream college for many of us. Um, Before I get pass the ball over to Mohit, I'd like to say a few words. Um, now, everybody on the SAS Global Education team is extremely passionate about education, about helping students like yourself. I'd like to tell you a little personal story about my own experiences, just so that you get an idea about, why SES Global came about, why we started it. So I have completed my engineering from MIT as well, but not the MIT. It's our own local Manipal Institute of Technology, which is a very good college, of course. So many of you must have heard about it. So I went ahead and completed my engineering at MIT several years back. And then, I worked for Wipro Infotech as a software programmer, got a lot of experience there. Life happened, got married, came to the US. Somewhere down the line, while I was working in the US as well as a software engineer, I realized that, this is not really something that I'm very passionate about. I used to enjoy it, but it wasn't my passion. So, after a lot of deliberation, I decided to go back to school. And this was not an easy decision. So, I took the plunge. I went back to do my doctorate. It took me 7 years because I switched my field from engineering right into healthcare, pharmacy. So, I'm a doctor of pharmacy. I attended school at Creighton University, which is in Omaha, Nebraska. And if you guys are familiar with the US, then you know it's in the Midwest. And it was a very long journey and it was not easy. I was working at that time too as a writer for the New York Times. I had a little child, and along the 7 years, I had two more children. So my study times were like 4 in the morning, 3 in the morning, things like that. I really had to go through a lot with the support of my family. But having done all that, now when I look back at it, I just have a feeling of pride for having accomplished so much under those circumstances. And what I would like to say is at the end of the day, education is something that never goes away. It's always a part of you. It helps to define you as a person, define your personality, make you an active contributor into society. And this is precisely the reason why we decided to start SAS Global Education, to help students like yourself pursue your dreams, your ambition, your career aspirations. Being an international student is not easy. There are a lot of hurdles that come in your way. There's so many things that's unclear. So we at SAS are truly equipped to provide to you the knowledge, the information that we have access to. I don't know if you're following our social media, but please follow us at SAS Global Education on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. So you'll get an idea of, how we are bringing these type of webinars to you with real students, with our student mentors like Mohit. We had one just a recent webinar from Princeton. So we are getting really, the top notch students to give you their own personal advice, their personal experiences. We have a global presence where we are very well connected with a lot of faculty members in good universities throughout the world. So by and by, we are going to be getting a lot more of these type of webinars and seminars, when things open up to you. Um, so the ultimate aim is that we are here for you. We are here to help you, to answer any questions you may have, to provide you support. while you get into, these years where you're struggling to find what the right college could be for yourself. Things like, how do you even do it, how do you apply, how do you shape your profile up? So all those things, we are here for you. Now, I'm not going to take up any more of your time. I know you guys are eagerly waiting for Mohit. So I'd just like to say a few words about Mohit, and he will explain to you the rest of it. So Mohit is pursuing his PhD at MIT, and MIT is, of course, the number one college in the world for many, many subject areas. He is, has gone through a lot to get into MIT, which he will talk about. Now at MIT, he has gotten, the world has practically opened up for him. He has done all these lovely research projects for Facebook, for Microsoft, for a lot of different, big organizations. He is currently doing his PhD under Esther Dufflo, who is the 2019 Nobel Prize laureate. So, I mean, nothing can be more prestigious than that. So I'm just going to go ahead and let Mohit take over. So let me just quickly stop sharing. And Mohit, you can go ahead and share your screen. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for the intro. Thanks everyone for coming. I guess you can see my screen right now, right? Is everything okay? Yep, cool. Great. So, sure. I'm happy to share my sort of journey to MIT here. I'll just talk for about 30 minutes. I'll give you a brief timeline of the stuff that I did before joining MIT and a bit of what I'm doing right now. I'll frame it as a timeline, and I'll sort of stop in important parts of the journey and things that I feel are sort of important. And yeah, and then I'll just open it up for Q&As. All right. So let's get started. All right. Hey again. My name is Mohit. I'm a third-year PhD student in MIT. I'm doing a dual degree in economics and statistics. So on the econ side, I work on topics related to development economics and market design. And on the statistics side, I'm interested in causal inference. All right. So before we start, I sort of wanted to give you a short disclaimer. I only deeply know how to apply to econ PhD programs in the US, because that's what I did, right? So I could speak a bit about other programs because I have friends that apply to other programs. I could speak a bit about masters because I also have a master's, but I didn't apply in the US, and I didn't really apply to other countries. So yeah, I'll just give it straight away. I'm not an expert in other fields. All right. I can give you a bit of general tips that might help others, but I don't know. Don't quote me on that. And yeah, so I'll just go over my timeline. I'll highlight some important aspects, and I'll show you a bunch of pictures. All right. So let me start with the origins. All right. I was born and raised in this northern town in Chile called Iquique. So I was always a math nerd. I used to love math. I used to go for math competitions and stuff. And then I decided to study economics when I was finishing high school, because I wanted to have a more applied perspective on I want to use math to solve sort of social issues. And in fact, at the beginning, I thought I would be a macroeconomist because sound macroeconomic policy can lift many people out of poverty. I ended up not doing that, but more on that later. And then after finishing high school, I just applied to college. Same in Chile, I didn't apply to college abroad or anything. I went to Universidad de Chile. This might be useful for some of you because a lot of people have the idea that to get into a good, PhD or master's degree, you need to go to a top fancy college. And I'm not sure if that's the case. I have friends that came from different universities all around the world and not very renowned, but I hope it's useful to know that. So, all right, I'll just briefly go through my college times. So while in college, I sort of dedicated most of my time to social programs. I used to teach math to poor high school kids that couldn't afford any, for example, prep school to get into college. I used to volunteer with different micro entrepreneurs that didn't really have like technical skills to set up their business. And yeah, I did that. And then I taught a lot. So I was a teaching assistant in many classes, and I did a lot of research also as an undergrad, because I always liked that, right? So since I started my undergrad, I was like, I want to do research, and I sort of knew that I wanted to do a PhD because, you know, a PhD is all about research. So here are a few random pics of the stuff that I did in college, but more than this, like more than the, you know, social volunteering kind of stuff, I feel like in college, you probably already know this, good grades and research skills are extremely important. So if you want to get into a PhD program, you really need to prove that you are strong in the academic side and you can do a lot of research, even more than sort of, you know, maybe volunteering. Like that's good for their soul, right? But it probably won't help you that much for getting into a PhD. It might be different for a master's though, as masters are usually more oriented to it, getting a job, and you know, in that case, volunteering could be a good experience. Also, teaching might help, but it's not required. So, you know, I have a lot of friends that have never taught a single class and are sort of already finishing their PhDs, because PhDs are really all about research. When people think about academia, they think about a lecturer, right? Someone that's teaching a class in a classroom. And yeah, like teachers teach, right? But researchers do research, and a PhD is all about research. So just like have that in mind. So more than the pictures that I showed you before, like the random, you know, social things, I feel that the most important pictures here are, you know, getting research done. So like try to start up a research project, you know, make some posters, go to conferences, like, you know, try to beef up your CV with the research experience that you have and the words that you have and the stuff that you've taught. Have some working papers. That's always good. It sort of signals that you actually started doing research before getting your PhD, which is good. And for those of you that are applying to econ programs, just a, you know, piece of advice: try to take these sort of advanced math classes, because, you know, some programs are explicit about it, like Penn in this case. So Penn was, you know, take real analysis, take point set topology, take a measure theoretic probability theory class. But others won't say anything. So just take them, and you can always have an appendix where you sort of mention that you did all this. So for those of you that are still doing your undergrads or that still have some classwork, try to get the advanced coursework that your degree will be requiring. All right, so that's for college. I'll move on to master's. I did my master's right there at Universidad de Chile. So, you know, the application procedure was super straightforward. It was like, did you have good grades as an undergrad? What's your CV? What's the stuff that you want to do as a master's student, like your master's thesis? But yeah, I didn't really apply to a top US school for my master's, so I can't really help you on that part. But what I can say is that most international students, when they get into their PhD, they usually already have a master's. And why is that? Well, because, you know, when you come from an international school that's not that renowned in the US, then you need a signal that you can actually compete with top US schools, right? So what happens is that usually international students will go in for a master's and then apply for their PhD, whereas US students will usually work as a research assistant for a while. So they can show that they have research skills. You get to show that by doing a good master's thesis. Also, there are different kinds of masters, right? So you have some masters that are oriented towards getting a job. Others are more academic. So I did the academic one, which is usually a stepping stone for a PhD degree. So if you're interested in doing a PhD, you might probably bias your search of masters towards those that are more academic. Because then you'll actually meet professors that do high level research, and you know that you'll have a good thesis advisor. You'll have to write a strong thesis, and yeah. So if your aim is to get into a PhD program, then you should go for an academic master's. Now, as I was saying, you usually do a master's because you need to have a signaling mechanism, to sort of compete with others. So with a master's, you signal a lot of things. First, you signal effort. So you went over your college degree and went to take more advanced coursework. So you're also signaling that you actually know advanced stuff. Just to give you an example. So in my master's, I covered most of the content that I would end up covering in my first year PhD, in the PhD. So yeah, like if you do a master's, you got good grades in your master classes and there's similar topics to what you'll be covering in your PhD, you're basically saying, hey, I won't fail this thing because I already did it and I did it right. Then you also signal researchability because you got to write a thesis. So if you have a good thesis project and you got it published or something, then you're again signaling that you have some sort of high researchability. You're competing again, right? So when you apply for a PhD, you need to submit your transcripts. So you need to show your undergrad transcripts, that's like always, but you can sometimes also show your master's transcript. So if you topped your undergrad degree and then you also topped your master's degree, then you're showing, look, I have 2 observations here to show you that I actually did well. And finally, you're also showing a bit of commitment because after getting a master's, you could get a lot of jobs, right? So if you, instead of taking a job, usually a well-paid job if you got a good master's, instead of doing that, you went for a PhD, then you're saying you're actually committed to that, right? So it's not like you're just going for the money or anything. You actually want to do research. Um, so yeah, while in your master's, make the most of it. So you gotta start thinking early about your advisor and your letter writers, because that's usually what will happen. So whoever is guiding your master's thesis, or in case you got to do an undergrad thesis and want to go straight for a PhD, well, your advisor will probably always be a letter writer. So you got to think about that in advance and think about who else is going to write a letter. So usually most programs require 3 letters of recommendation. Some require 4. So if you get 4 people that can actually talk about you and like vouch for you, that's good. And you should start doing it in advance. You don't want to be like, oh, there are 6 months left for my, the application deadline, and I don't know who's going to be my letter writer. No, you got to like build those relations in advance. So do that. You should also try to ace your classes again, because you'll be showing 2 transcripts. So you can show that you did well in your undergrad and in your master's. Try to cross-register with other programs. Like, so if you can take classes at other universities, like good universities, that's a good thing to do, because you sort of get the best of both worlds. So the best of what your program has to give and other programs as well. Try to conduct research as much as you can, again, because you need a signal that you actually can do research even without a PhD. And then write a killer dissertation. So that seems like a lot, but yeah, you got to work hard. This is like your last shot before the PhD. So make the most of it. And yeah, I'll just like show you some random pictures of people that, these are 9 people that I sort of really connected with. So for example, I had my dissertation committee. You usually have 3 people in your committee. So these were the people that guided my thesis, but this was my main thesis advisor. Then I had letter writers. I had 4 because some programs will allow you up to 4. You need at least 3. So think about them in advance. People with whom I co-authored a paper, people from other universities. I was a grad teaching assistant for them and him. I taught classes with him. He actually got me a job as a mathematics teacher, also at the university later on. So yeah, you got to start thinking about who you want to connect with and who's going to write your letters, right? That's extremely important. Letters are really, really important. So you don't want to wait till the end and just say like, oh, I'll go with this one. No, really do your research. And especially with your advisor, you really need to think it's super hard. So you obviously want someone that does research on topics that you're interested in. But you also want someone that you can sort of connect at a personal level, because you're going to spend a lot of time with your advisor, like, I don't know, late evenings at the office with a lot of whiteboard dust. And yeah, if you cannot really connect with that person, you'll be sort of miserable. So try to look for that as well. And finally, look for someone that knows what he or she is talking about. So, that has experience writing letters, or knows what a PhD is all about, like a top-notch PhD. Some people be super straightforward. Like he just told me, dude, even without like I didn't even have to ask for a letter or anything. Like ex ante, he told me my letter won't be useful for you. So just look for other letter writers before you even ask me for a letter. And that's fine. Like you need to look for people that know how to write letters and know how to place people at schools, at top schools. So how would you know that? Well, you can always check their CVs, right? So you can check where they did their education, where they've worked at, what's their previous placement record. So if someone always places people at good schools, that's probably a safe bet, right? You don't know, things might always change, but it's good to know. And yeah, random picture, I used to swim a lot while I was doing my master's, but that's sort of relevant. Maybe it helped, I don't know. But yeah. All right, so that's with the master's. I did my master's between 2015 and 2016, and then I worked for a while, right? Now, this is not the usual thing to do. A lot of people just do their master's and go straight for their PhD. Others just will do their undergrad, will RA for a while, go for their PhD. Others, like some really, really specific cases, would go from their undergrad straight to the PhD, but that's not usually the case with international students. So I'm just not covering that case. But in my case, I worked. So I got an academic job as an instructor. This is also important. Like if you want to go into industry, that's fine. But if ex post you want to do a PhD, then you got to somehow signal that at industry you also did some research work, right? So if you went to do on fully practical and applied stuff and no like academic, without any academic atmosphere in your job, then you're probably saying, hey, maybe I don't like research that much, right? So you got to think about the job that you're taking. It's not always the case. Like I have friends that went to Goldman and then started their PhD, or went to some fintech and then went for the PhD. That's completely feasible. It's just like the usual thing is to always stay involved with research, right? I also sort of applied my research as an antitrust consultant. So, when you had big mergers and you need to compute, I don't know, you need to estimate demands and what would happen and what's the impact on consumers. This was more on the applied side, but my master's thesis was about industrial organization. So I was directly applying my research here. And yeah, at least I got like a ton of job offers, and that might be the case for you as well. And you might always be tempted to just like drop out and get a job. And that's not always the best strategy to if you're aiming for a PhD. So keep that in mind. You gotta be committed with what you're doing. And then while I was working, I also finished and disseminated my thesis. So technically my master's was 2015 and 2016. I ended up finishing it like late 2017. Not advised, like try to finish it up, but I took a bit longer because I was doing other stuff at the same time. But I also, started working on my PhD applications while I was doing all of this, right? So it's not like I said, all right, I'm applied this year and this year I started working on stuff. No, you should start thinking in advance, right? So if I started my PhD in 2018, by 2016, I already sort of had the idea of what did I have to do, right? And yeah, take your tests, write your SOPs, do your paperwork ASAP. I'll cover more on this on the next slide. So I don't have any nice pictures for this part of my timeline, but I do think that the most important pictures here are just snapshots of my thesis. Like you really need to work on your thesis. And then if you can also disseminate it and get like press coverage and stuff, that also work. Because then you're showing that what you did actually had an impact, and you're sort of, for example, fixing the Chilean public procurement system. And that helps, because if you're able to prove that, then you're showing that your research actually has impact, and you can write about that in your SOP, right? So it's not, you don't want to just like have a bunch of math and in some PDF wandering around the internet. You want to show that your research has impact, and then you can talk about that in your SOP, and that will help, right? All right, so this slide is really important, I feel. There are only 3 months in the timeline, But yeah, when you're applying, just like try to drop everything else at some point. Like as I was saying, I sort of worked and did stuff while I was, working my application. But at some point you got to be like super serious about this. So no more teaching, no more antitrust cases. Like from mid-September to mid-December, when usually, most of US PhD degrees close their application period, I only worked on this. So I only polished my thesis. I finished up some appendices and, check for every single typo. Because then later on, you need to submit a writing sample. So you need to have a paper that you'll say like, hey, look, I can do research. Here's a proof of it. Then also crafted my CV. So I added a few lines. I went to conferences, and that always adds up. Deleting matters as well. So you have like, you don't want to send a 4-page CV, at most 2 pages. That's it. So you need to think about what you want to include in your CV. So try keeping the most important things. You got to carefully tailor your statement of purpose. So I don't know, I wrote my first statement of purpose in September, even though the application was due in December, because you really need to think about what you want to say, how you want to say it. And here it's good to have help. Like, so example, I don't know, if someone is offering a service to, I don't know, help you with your statement of purpose, that might be worth it. If you can afford it, that you should really try to think about it. In my case, my advisor helped me here, but I don't know if you have an expert that can help you on this, that's always useful, because this is really important. Paperwork, never underestimate it. So, sometimes you need to get a lot of transcripts because you need to send stuff by mail. You need to get some official signatures from government institutions and stuff like that. So don't wait on this, like try to get it ASAP. And yeah, the TOEFL and the GRE and every test that you can do, they're usually, they don't expire. So, they expire like maybe 2 years after you take it. So just do it in advance. Like, so the best strategy is usually get that out of the way as soon as you can. So if you want to start preparing for it, you want to take prep classes or anything, do it fast, get those tests, get good scores here. Usually like top PhD programs, at least in econ and other, more quantitative programs, they usually require you to ace or close to ace your math GRE. Now, some degrees are not requiring GREs anymore. You got to check that. But in my case, I was advised, get all 170 points, and otherwise just give it again until you get those 170 points. So my idea was like, okay, I'll take it in March. I have a full year. So if I do not get the 170, I'll go for it again. Sometimes you're lucky and just get all of them in March. That's good. Otherwise, you should try again. Same with the TOEFL. You don't need to ace the TOEFL, but it's recommended that you show something really high, like top places. You're in a safe side if you have 110 out of 120. Others could be like over 100. I don't know. Just like try to get good scores here. And for example, if you're working on the verbal GRE and you're applying for a math PhD, then you probably don't need to ace the verbal one. Just focus on the math one. But yeah, share all of this with your advisors and letter writers. This is super important because you might be talking about something in your SOP, and then your advisor will notice, oh, this person didn't really talk much about this other good aspect about him or her. So I'll mention that in my letter. And you can never read the letters, like they're secretly submitted to the program right away. So yeah, just like you can share your stuff with your advisors and your letter writers. They won't share the letters with you. So because that's just not done. There's some secrecy on the process. But yeah, it's good so you're also aligned and coordinated on what you're saying, right? And then apply to many places. Like there's always some randomness around there. Like sometimes you can get into a really good place and get rejected somewhere else because, I don't know, the person that read your stuff really wasn't interested in that topic, so thought that you weren't a strong candidate. So yeah, apply to many places. It might be expensive because they have, fees, but application fees, but many places are waiving them. So, or you can apply for waiver, just like read that. keep track of all the applications, the application deadlines. Not all schools close on the same date. So just keep tracking that. Like have your nice spreadsheet with all the requirements, all the schools, all the deadlines, etc. All right. After applying, I did something a bit unconventional. So you probably shouldn't do this, but after applying, I got a job. Usually people get the job, the research job at these places before applying. So then you get someone from, I don't know, the NBR or Microsoft Research to write a letter for you. That wasn't my case. I already submitted my letters, but it was still, I told them I'd already applied. So if I got into a top program, I could. And so I did. So as I was saying, this was completely irrelevant for my admission. Like everything was already done. I'd already sent my package to all the schools. But it was definitely a great experience because you get used to life in the US. I got to travel a lot. I started new projects that I would later continue working on while on my PhD. And then I also met many of the people that would end up being my classmates. Like, as I was saying, many Americans just do research, they work as research assistants before starting their PhDs, and they will be working at these top institutions with top faculty. So they end up being placed at top universities. So if you get an offer to work with a top faculty, just like, don't think it twice. You're like, if you take this, your odds of getting into a top program are like super, super high. So yeah, something to think about. Now there's this discussion on how useful are these pre-docs, because they're costly. You could be working on other things instead of getting the salary of a research assistant. But still, most people do it because they want to get into top school, and they do end up getting into top schools. So then everyone wants to do it, and everyone gets into top schools if they get these top research positions. So yeah, it's a bit of a complicated topic, but that's reality right now. So yeah, random pictures of the places I visited while working, more random pictures about like, doing some math around here, a lot of tech stuff that I was invited to. I used to work in auction theory in my thesis, so I obviously wanted a picture with Paul Milgram in the visiting days, Albert Einstein's house, whatever. So yeah, good fun times. A bit unconventional because you usually do this before applying, not after applying. But let's move on. So now I'm sort of done with my journey towards the PhD. Like in this period, usually like in March, you start, or late February, you start getting acceptance letters. So I was done. I got into the places that I wanted to get. I quit my job, and then I started my PhD. So at least in econ, the first 2 years are just classes. So you take 4 classes per semester. At other econ programs, they require 3 instead of 4. But this is not the norm for other disciplines. I have friends that just take 4 classes in total in their whole PhD. So yeah, it's quite different. And you still do a bit of research. In my case, I took some extra classes in the math and CS departments and applied for this dual PhD in statistics. I continued the research that I started at NBR and Microsoft Research, so that was useful. Even though it was sort of unconventional, I met people, I got new co-authors. I also got to keep the office at the NBR, so that was fun. And then I started another research project with Facebook Research. So once you're in, you can just like start proposing research ideas. And if they're interesting for people like Facebook, for example, they'll offer you like, hey, come for the summer as an intern. And instead of working on the stuff that we want to do, like you work on your research project, we'll give you the data. That's what happened in my case. And then, early this year, COVID hit. So I started doing COVID research with Esther Dufflo, who was doing research on this topic as a sort of research assistant at the beginning. She later on ended up becoming my advisor. But yeah, so, this is a random thing. The research that I started doing at NBR and Microsoft Research, eventually my boss sort of created this startup. It's an NGO actually, super cool. And yeah, we keep on doing research now under the umbrella of this startup. And yeah, random pictures of PhD. All right. short in time, so I'll just continue with the phase two of the research of PhD. So the first 2 years were mostly classes. Now I'm a third year student, so I basically just do research. I continued working with Esther. Random fact, we are still working on COVID research, but now we're actually working with Facebook as well. So I sort of got back to the Facebook environment as well. Um, and yeah, the next 3.5 years of my PhD are pure research. Classes are not required. I still want to take some classes. You can cross-register, which is fun. So you also get like, your classmates from other universities, different experiences. That's fun. And you also get a super, absurd amount of freedom when doing your research. This again is like context dependent. Some advisors just want you to work on the stuff that they're doing. In econ, at least in general, you're free to explore. You write papers on super different projects, topics, and then you choose how to shape your dissertation. So here's some random screenshots and Esther's picture of getting her Nobel Prize, whatever. And yeah, so these are vast, like really, really different on really on topics. So these are the areas that we're covering with this COVID paper with Facebook. I can't give you much details, but it's huge. This is the US, so it's like many millions of people. Uh, this is a sort of identification diagram for a project on like externalities with the Chilean higher education system. This is again helping the Ministry of Education doing a better screening of their teachers. So who can get to be a teacher in Chile and who isn't. Long run international and long run mobility, like urban mobility in Chile as well. A new estimator that I'm proposing, an algorithm of a paper. So super random, super diverse. You choose what you want to do. And yeah, I think like my timer says that I'm over 30 minutes here. So I'll just close it here and open it up for Q&As.
So, what I would like to do is, first of all, thank Mohit for presenting so well, for giving us so much information, so much relevant information. Um, and before we answer the questions, I just like to do a brief recap about a few very important points that struck across to me at least. One of the things that definitely came right through loud and clear is that it takes time for a good application, a good profile to be built. It takes 2 to 3 years, sometimes even more. You have to start way in advance building up your profile. So this is not something that can happen overnight. It needs a lot of thought, it needs a lot of effort, and you need to know which direction you're going. Different schools have different criteria as well. So it's not a one size fits all kind of fundamental. Everyone's profiles are different, everyone's interests are different. What you want to do in your life is different, right? You might enjoy research in a certain area, you might want to specialize in something else. No two people are similar. So it's very important that what you want to achieve in your life, and you plan way ahead way ahead, and have your stepping stones ready, so that you know exactly what to do, when to do what. And it's more like a smooth journey, rather than doing it haphazardly. In the last year you're like, oh my god, I've not done this, I've not done that. So that's definitely something that struck out for me, that you need time. Start applying, start thinking of this whole application process, what you want to do, your future goals, about 2 to 3 years before you actually go in for it. Second thing is very important, is that you need to know your colleges, because every college, MIT might be good in something, Princeton might be good in something, Stanford might be good in something. So you have these different options open to you, and it's important that you know which college suits your line of research, your field of specialization, right? The third thing that's very important, which also Mohit highlighted, is the SOP. Now, see, remember, when the admissions committee is looking at you, all they can see is not your face. They don't have any idea about you as a person. All they can see is your grades, your test scores, and your profile, and along with it, plus your SOP. Now, your SOP is the thing that speaks. speaks about you, speaks about your achievements, speaks about your um, nature as a person also many times. So that SOP is extremely, extremely important, because that is your ticket into the door, right? If they like what they see in your SOP, your chances are really high that they're going to go through the rest of your application. Okay, so that's something again is very important, the SOP. Letters of recommendation, as you get higher and higher into like PhD level and all that, those type of things, your letters of recommendation, it's really important who writes it and how they are written and what they say about you. It's not a question. I know in India sometimes what happens is that your college faculty will just sign it, and say okay, go, whatever. But you need somebody who has a good background in the areas that you are interested in pursuing your PhD in, right? So those letters of recommendation have to be carefully thought of. Who's going to write them for you? What should be the content? Those type of things. It's important you have guidance and in your mind that this is going to help this college. This is going to help in admission to this college. So that's again an important area. And the last thing I'd want to say is about test prep scores. As we all know, test prep scores are crucial, not because of anything else, but if you have a low score, they're going to straight away reject your application. Many places do that. Some places give you a chance, but then things like math, they want to see a solid score, right? So those type of things are something that you have to pay attention to. January, February, March are great months where you should join a program. We have batches opening, so just in case anyone is looking, get that out of the way. And you will need help in order to ace those math scores. It's not easy to do your own preparation. It's better to take expert advice from our faculty, because they know the tips and tricks, and you'll end up saving yourself a lot of effort and time by going in for an actual course rather than trying to do it by yourself, especially since your aim is like almost a perfect score. Um, so there are many ways of getting into PhD programs that are reputed. It's not necessary that you have to get into good college for your masters, as Mohit said. We have options for you where we will guide you how to get into your master's programs. We can even get you into places like Chile, like where Mohit went. If you're not interested in doing your master's in India or even in the US because of the expenses, there are other places that you can have low cost master's programs, which will also then give you a stepping stone to the US. And lastly, actually, I know I said that was the last point, but then I just thought of something that is very relevant to the US. Now that Joe Biden is coming in with Kamala Harris, the whole outlook for the US has changed. And is changing, when he comes in on Jan 20th, because he has clearly said that for PhD holders, he is going to make it very easy to get a green card. So just wanted to throw that out there. It's very unlike the Trump administration. So now is a great time to go in for education in the US, especially for PhD, because he has clearly put that on his site. You can look it up on Google, that he is going to do, make it very easy. People who are spending time and money and, have the skill set to do their PhD in the US, he's going to make it very easy for them to get a green card. So that's something that I just read a week back, and I wanted to share with all of you. All right. So now what I'm going to do is, take some questions from the team. I know that from the chat, I know that people have already typed in some questions. So what I'm going to do is that let me take a look at the chat box, and then after that we will. Actually, let me just stop sharing because it's difficult for me to read the questions. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the top. And the first question that I can see here is from COVID Thalia. So he's saying, and Mohit, let me unmute you also. So he's saying that he is currently pursuing his computer science. If he wants to change his stream from computer science to quant finance, how will it affect his chances to get admitted into a top university?
Right. So that's actually quite common. Many of my classmates did not do an undergrad in econ. They did either math or CS or engineering, and that's completely fine. Like you gotta highlight what part of your skill set will be useful for the degree you're applying to. So if you want to do quant finance and you did CS, then you obviously are good at coding and you could implement like fast algorithms to exploit arbitrage opportunities, for example. And that's something that big quant finance people are super interested in. So you probably won't be that into, for example, I don't know, the fundamentals of assets and how to price them, but you will definitely be super strong on the implementation part of these algorithms, and you gotta sell yourself in that way, right? So it's okay. You don't need to have the, I don't know, if you want to do finance, you don't need to have an undergrad in finance. That's, in fact, it's sometimes even better to have an undergrad in something else, because later on you'll still learn finance, and if you already learned something else in your undergrad, that might be useful as long as there is some connection between both degrees.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. That's pretty helpful, Mohit. Now we have a question from Jay Menon. He's saying that he's asking, can I get into a university such as MIT in the field of robotics with a moderate GPA, but with a good background in R&D? Because he's worked in a lot of different projects in robotics and other booming technological domains. So, is that good enough, or will his GPA count against him?
I mean, it's always better to have a high GPA, but you can still make it. So I have a friend that didn't do that well in his undergrad, and later on he just went and took like master's classes at another university, did super well there. Then he also did a lot of research, and then he still ended up getting into Princeton. So yeah, his undergrad grades were like super average. He wasn't like the worst of the court or anything, but he wasn't nearly like near top to the top. So he was a regular undergrad, regular GPA, not that good. But later on, if you do solid research and you can prove yourself somewhere else, like in a master's or just taking some graduate courses, you don't need to have the full master. That worked for him. So yeah, I guess you could do the same. Especially if your research is really, really appealing to the committee. At the end, like you got to do research, right? So if you can come up with this amazing project that you can sell in your SOP, and some advisor is willing to take it, then your grades won't really affect you that much. But again, you need to compensate for that, right? So
Okay. Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. Now, the other question was from Bharti. How important is work experience for a master's program? Do you need to have work experience to apply for your master's, or that's, I mean, what is the weightage in your
it
opinion of it?
So if you want to do an academic master's, like the one that I did, you don't need any work experience. I went straight from my undergrad to that master's. And in fact, it's sometimes advised to do that if you're applying for an academic master's. However, if you're applying to something more on the applied side, for example, or if you want to do an MBA, then you definitely need work experience. Like, I don't know if anyone that has done an MBA without working for a few years before.
Okay, so you
So
you have to work. Yeah, it's very important to have some work experience before doing your MBA. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. What are the important factors for thesis writing? I mean, I know that's a big one. So I think if we can just kind of give a brief couple pointers, and then, I guess if you want more, then you have to contact us, guys. Yeah, Mohit.
Yeah. So first think about the topic, right? So many people sometimes just say like, okay, I'm good at math. I'll just write these bunch of like crazy hard things, but I'm not tackling any important question, right? So if you want to do a thesis in math, you first look at the research area that you want to tackle, look at the question you want to answer, and then start working on it. In fact, that I'd say that's the most important part of any research paper. It's just like the question you're trying to answer or where you're sort of pushing the frontier, right? If you're just like doing something for the sake of, or for the sake of, showing off your skills, that won't really work if you're not answering anything important.
Okay. I have a question from Bhupendra, but again, that's a little detailed about, what he should do if he wants to pursue his PhD in MIT or Harvard. He has a background doing architecture, I believe. So, Bhupendra, if you're still on the call, please, I would advise you to just drop us an email. We'll get an answer for you, okay? Because that's a little going into a little more detail. Um, we have another question from Rishikesh. He is doing his BTech in final year electrical engineering, but again, same thing. His academic profile may not be the best. So, what would be the kind of quick fix for that? Should he work somewhere and then apply, or what should he do?
If you want to do a PhD, then yeah, you need to sort of redeem yourself with more research. Um, so yeah, if your GPA isn't that strong, just find a good research project or go RA for someone and work on something interesting. Or if you can do a master's, that could also work. You're sort of saying like, look, I had a bad start, but then I fixed it up and now I top this master. And yeah, that's a way of doing it.
Okay, okay. Um, do we have to publish papers in order to get admission into a PhD program?
No, in fact, when I applied, I had some papers submit. I had like one publication in something that in like a national journal, so nothing really important in that sense. And I had one paper that we had already submitted, but it takes a while. Like you need to have working papers. You need to have stuff that you've written. In fact, you need a writing sample, so you need to have at least one super polished paper that you're sending. But it doesn't have to be published.
Okay, okay. Um, I have a question from Omkar. He's trying to get into MIT for his master's, for actually an MS in computer science, specialized in machine learning. He is a fresher bachelor student. So, any tips for Omkar here?
Um, if
In
so, if you want to get into
mm,
an
MS, specialized
uh,
in machine learning. So, any tips, maybe what can he do to bring out his interest in machine learning? Maybe,
sure.
what should.
So with the machine learning folks, the story is a bit different. Usually, especially when you're talking about masters. So if you're talking about PhDs, it's similar. Just do a lot of research. Um, if you want to do a master's and more on the applied side, something that will get you a job, a good tip is usually to start working on machine learning projects. So I don't know, I took this data and then I implemented this algorithm and I got this score that beats sort of the state of art that's being applied to this thing. And then you can show like, hey, I can implement machine learning models. I can do it right. I know how to tune up, I don't know, network architectures. I know how to clean data super well. And like, well, that's probably basic, but I know how to get stuff done with machine learning. And then you say like, okay, I want to do this master because I want to work in this industry, I want to work in tech, and I want to improve, for example, recommendation systems in different websites. And look, I wrote this thing that improves on what we had before. So do machine learning projects, like get your hands on your computer and do stuff. That might be useful.
Um, I have unmuted you, Varun. I know you have a question. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Deepika. Hi, Mohit. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
All right. I hope you're doing well, Mohit. My question is to you. I just got done with my bachelor's, but my coursework did not include much of data science. So I'm taking these specializations by Professor Andrew Ng on deep learning. And since you've also done those, what would be your advice to me to make the most out of it, not just to earn a certificate to add on my LinkedIn, but to actually learn stuff and implement it to build a portfolio? Because I'm going to be like applying for masters and I really need to like prove to the admissions committee that I am interested in it, right? And my bachelor's did not have anything to do with it specifically.
Mhm. Yeah, great question. In fact, that's fairly typical. Many undergrad degrees haven't updated yet, and aren't teaching these skills that are super required nowadays. So yeah, I also did the deep learning.ai thing with Andrew Ng in Coursera. And what I ended up doing is, yeah, I obviously did all the homework and stuff and got my certificate, but then I applied all the same tools to other research projects that I was interested in, such as like the teacher screening thing that I was showing in the slides. So like, now let's take real data, dirty data, and let's try to solve some issue, like how to hire better teachers in Chile. So you could do something like that. You already know the basic skills that you were taught in these online courses. You definitely need to put this in your CV and LinkedIn, but then you need to show like, hey, look, even though I didn't take any formal class, I can actually do real things with this, right? And then you highlight your projects. In fact, when you're applying to masters, it's a bit different from your PhD. Like you need to tailor your CV to the masters, because a PhD CV is super different from a master's CV. In your PhD, you need to show academics, you need to show scholarships, you need to show research projects, letter of recommendation, stuff like that. Well, you always need letter of recommendations anyways. But in your master's, you usually want to write a few extra lines on what you actually did and how that's useful and what you achieved. That's usually not that required in your PhD. Like you want a short, concise CV, lines of the stuff that you've done, what you've been able to accomplish. But here you want to get some explanation, like, hey, I took this class and then I applied these tools to solve this real issue. And that might be useful if you're applying for a master's, even though you didn't have like formal experience in your undergrad. Now, another important thing that might be also relevant for the previous question, you have Kaggle competitions. So if you want to really test your skills and sort of show that you're able to compete with top people in the field, you can enter Kaggle competitions. Kaggle is just like a website where different companies, for example, or NGOs will post challenges. They'll give you data and you have a task. For example, build the best predictor for, I don't know, housing rental prices. So if you score super high there's always a leaderboard, right? So if you're super high in there, you can say like, hey, look, I'm competing against top people around the world. I know what to do. I did it, and I can prove it here. That's also useful. Like enter these machine learning competitions or go to hackathons. Hackathons are super, open to anyone. And if you get a prize in a hackathon, that's also something good to put in your PhD, in your CV.
I hope that answered your question. I have one question from Rishikesh. Rishikesh, did you want to go ahead? You're unmuted.
Yeah, thank you, Deepika ma'am, for giving me the opportunity. Hello.
Yes, of course, anytime.
My question to you and Mohit sir as well is that just I mentioned that I'm a final year student of electrical engineering and I want to pursue my higher studies there in US and especially in I'll try my level best to find in MIT. But the problem with my profile is that I had a lot of academic arrears. Okay, so what can you give me the complete suggestion that what should be done or what are the steps to be done to restructure my academic profile so that my way will be convenient to get admission to the higher studies, especially in the field of power electronics in MS.
Yeah, actually, Mohit has already answered your question in some ways. So, what I would suggest, Rishikesh, is that since we are getting into details over here, we'd like to see which subjects exactly that you have scored lower in, and what can be done, how impactful those subjects are on what field you're pursuing, and accordingly suggest something based on your profile. So I think that if you can get in touch with us, the phone number's in the chat, or if you want, you can email us at info@sasglobaleducation.com, right?
Okay.
And we'll be more than happy to connect you with our counselors, and they will give you a detailed explanation of what can be done. Okay, and we'll see your options.
It's okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Thanks. I have one question from Grishma that I found very interesting. Can we get full funded scholarships for a PhD at MIT?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, if you don't get funding, I'd highly advise not to go for it. Usually most PhDs, it's atrociously expensive. So if you get into a good PhD, they will usually fund you. If they don't fund you, it's almost as if they're saying you're not in, or, try to get funding from somewhere else. But yeah, I don't know of anyone that's actually paying everything. I don't think that's a thing. In masters, it's a different story. Like masters are usually, they know they're made for industry and you're gonna get a good salary. So a lot of people just like take loans and go for masters without getting any funding. But when you're doing a PhD, it's super long. And at the end, you're also doing research for the university, right? So you're gonna write papers, and my papers say MIT. So MIT is also getting something out of it. I'm also, next semester I'll be teaching. You can work as a research assistant. So usually you get funding. Sometimes you get conditional funding. So like MIT will give you money if you teach one class next semester. And that's fine. Others won't require any teaching. Like, I don't know. I know some PhDs at business schools are super nice in that sense. They'll give you even more funding than other schools, and they won't require any teaching. Like, I don't know, Stanford GSB offered me like a really good package. It's a small program, right? So they give a lot of money to all their people, and they also don't require any teaching. But yeah, you can definitely get a fully funded PhD. In fact, that's sort of the norm, conditional on, selection bias, whatever.
Okay. I think Arushi has sent you a direct message with her questions. If you don't mind, can you take a look at that, Mohit? I
Yeah,
can. Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, in fact, sorry, I have like many private questions that we haven't covered. Like if you can write it again, that's better. Oh, I found it. Arushi Mishra, right? Oh, but wait, I think there are a few. All right. Yeah, okay. So the first one is, as an undergrad, is it possible for me to be part of a research project or anything similar? I'm aiming for courses in physical chemistry. Yeah, definitely. So when you're an undergrad, you're probably not going to lead a research project by yourself, especially if you need to get access to a lab, as in physical chemistry, unless you're a computational chemist. That's also the case. But yeah, you can always start as a research assistant, even when you're an undergrad. You don't need to go like a full-time RA position. That's definitely not the case. You cannot do that when you're an undergrad because you need to pass your classes, right? But for example, at MIT, we have this program called Europe. So it's undergraduate research opportunities. And yeah, usually professors are looking for undergrads that can perform some simple tasks. And maybe those simple tasks aren't that interesting for you. Like you'll just have to clean some data or measure something in the lab a few times. But you actually won't be writing any paper. You won't be doing the glamorous part of research. But that still helps. Like that'll give you some exposure on how research works. That'll get you connected with professors. Though those professors could eventually become letter writers. So yeah, it is possible. It's actually advised to do research projects as an undergrad in any field, not only in physical chemistry. And I think there's another one from Arushi. Yeah, so what extracurriculars would you suggest to satisfy the competitiveness factor? Oh, so when I was talking about competitiveness, I was saying basically, when you apply, you need to submit your transcripts, and usually you need to submit your rank in your cohort, right? So when I was saying you got to be competitive, you got to show that you either were like the number one, or that's the best case, right? Or in the top 10%. But if you're somewhere like close to the median, then you're not showing that you're a very competitive candidate, right? So that's what I meant. And I don't know if extracurriculars actually help in that sense. In fact, like if you're going to spend too much time doing extracurriculars and that will harm your academics and your research side, you should definitely not do it. I mean, if your aim is to get into a top PhD program. So yeah, that's what I went with, the competitiveness side. Also, one extracurricular that could actually be helpful is when I was talking, about how your research has an actual impact. So I don't know, when I was writing my thesis, I used to meet a lot of people from the government. I used to have lunch with them and tell them like, look, I'm finding these things and the public procurement system in Chile is sort of screwed and you need to fix it. And these were like obviously extracurriculars. They were not required. No one told me, hey, you need to talk to these people to pass this class. No, but that's something extra I wanted to do because I wanted my thesis to actually have impact. So for example, if you're working on physical chemistry and I don't know, you go more on the material science part of it and you discover this new material that could have some important impact, then you want to do something extra about it, right? So you want to go to the, I don't know, people in the press or, I don't know, go to different companies and show a bit your product, like highlight it. And that can help in your application, definitely. I think, yeah, I don't see anything else by Arushi.
Okay. Okay, so definitely what I'd like to say that one second, let me just share my contact information first of all, so that if we have missed any questions of any kind, we have tried our best to answer whatever has come in. But in case we have missed any questions, please feel free to contact us at either you can give us a phone call. This is our website. You can email us at info@sasglobaleducation.com, and please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at SAS Global Education, because we have a lot more coming your way. And of course, Mohit's, he's our superstar. I just want to say a big, big, big thank you to you, Mohit, for educating all of us, for giving so many insights, about what you went through, what your personal challenges were, how much work has gone into the whole process. And definitely, it's not an easy feat. And I think that, hats off to you for all the hard work that you've put in. And definitely, I know that a lot of students capable of it. I think if everybody believes in themselves, they can definitely achieve, their goal and their dreams, just like you have done. So thank you so much for sharing all this information with us. And students, I'm really apologize about the technical glitches in the middle. But if you do want to get in touch with us, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll do all we can to ensure that, we are here for you and answer all your queries. So thank you so much, and really appreciate you spending this time with us. And we hope to hear from you all, and all the very best to all of you in your individual endeavors.
Thank you for the invitation and thank you all for coming. Happy to answer any other questions. If you want to stay in touch, like just shoot me an email or anything, or shoot an email to
Yeah,
SCS.
we'll be happy. We'll be happy to forward the questions to Mohit, and you will be getting the answers back from him. He is our student mentor, so definitely we'll be more than happy to help you guys with any remaining questions that might pop up. Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Have a nice day.